Thank you everyone for joining us today and welcome to our webinar, Hearts of Darkness on the Front Lines of American Death, Disability, and Insurance by our team at Insurance Collaboration to Save Lives. I am Mitch Bagley and will play part moderator and presenter for today's webinar. I've had the fortune of serving on our board for the last year at ICSL and have led our marketing and communications team for the past 2.5 years. I'd like to thank Brian Barber, who's our digital leader, for helping put on this presentation today. There will be a Q&A section at the end of this, so please feel free to put any questions in the chat box option, or we will allow you to unmute at the end of the presentation today. So, brief disclaimer, we are a nonprofit trying to bring education around the health trends in our analysis at the collaboration. The views today are not expressed by the companies that our presenters represent. Our presenters today include our founder and president of Insurance Collaboration to Save Lives, Josh Stirling. Josh was a former #1 Wall Street analyst and a former InsurTech advisor. He started the Insurance Collaboration in 2022 with the help of medical doctors and actuaries. Mary Pat Campbell, who's an insurance research at Conning. Mary Pat is an ICSL steering committee member and ICSL actuarial team advisor. And for those who are on Substack, I would highly recommend giving Mary Pat a follow to learn the latest trends and data in the industry. Steve Saborn, CEO at Humaculture. Steve leads our product development and innovation team and also serves as an actuarial team advisor. And Greg Hankey, executive director at Blue Sky Advisors, is a former chief life actuary and investment officer in the industry. Greg is a steering committee member and is a leader on our partnership development team at the collaboration. The three topics that we look to cover today: mortality and morbidity do not seem to be improving. Proactive health initiatives can make a difference with the trends that we will discuss today. And finally, how you and your company can help our mission to save 1 million lives. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our founder, Josh Stirling.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm delighted to be here. And, before we talk a little bit about the history, I just want to say, I think this is at least the 11th or 12th, public event we as an organization have done over the past 3 years. And we're thrilled to have, thrilled to have people joining us today. And the expectation that we're going to distribute this all over the internet and certainly to the the broader the public, in weeks to come. So thank you for that, and thank you for all the interest in our work, and thank you for the for the team of people you see here and the many other people behind the scenes that are working in different aspects of this project that are making this all possible. Back in 2023, when we did a presentation about 18 months ago. We put as centerpiece this tweet from Dr. Califf, who at the time was the head of the FDA, basically calling out Americans' long-term health trajectories, in particular their mortality and their declining life expectancy, as a catastrophe. And then this is, these were his words. If we go to the next slide, that of course has focused a lot of discussion and what does that really mean? And if you were to look in we have a couple different actuaries. We've got at least 3 actuaries on this call, and we've got lots of other actuaries probably in the audience. And so the answer, of course, is that there's never a single number on anything in particular that you can point to and know for sure. It has to do with methodology and so on and so forth. But very clearly, there's 2 things that are clear from the data. One, there was a major spike in mortality rising over the many years of COVID, and that's, I think, been well discussed by now. And thankfully, a lot of that has been ameliorated. However, what is most interesting when we think about our future work and our future efforts to try to improve the lives of our policyholders and make a difference in our communities is the very clear distinction between the older folks, where mortality has actually declined in the past couple of years since COVID, versus younger people, where actually mortality continues to be elevated. And that distinction, which is that younger people who typically weren't as unhealthy and or weren't necessarily dying at the same rates before the pandemic, this is the area that is most fertile for the work of the industry if we're going to try to make a positive impact. Unfortunately, bringing this back to insurance, insurance collaboration to save lives, it's the industry we all come from. it's never fun to be right when you're calling for, problems to emerge. But very clearly, recent earnings reports from folks all across the insurance industry are showing mortality challenges, morbidity challenges. In particular, the health insurance industry is taking a big is really struggling at this moment, and that is for a variety of reasons, for sure. But underlying health dynamics seem to be contributing to this problem. We, of course, as an organization, are a group of insurance leaders. We're working together to try to save lives and mitigate loss. We're very collaborative. That's in the title. And so, at this point, almost all of us are still volunteers. And our original idea was to tackle these problems by focusing on low-cost screening, testing, and triage. Using the experience of the life insurance industry doing like fluid-based testing, which it's accumulated for like 20 or 30 years, to help drive as a proactive effort to improve health. More importantly, from that, we've learned as we've gone on this journey that the real key is not necessarily focus on that specific solution, but rather to truly engage and empower global insurers to be more focused on saving lives and ultimately by doing so saving money. We're thrilled and honored by the traction we've gotten in the industry. At the beginning, AM Best was writing about the prospects that we had to, our vision and our sort of a bold new approach. Just this past month, we're honored to have a piece in the Best Review, the most important magazine in the insurance industry, talking about the new partnership, which we're going to discuss, towards the end of the call. And so thank you, AM Best, and, thank you for everyone who's brought us to this point. I'm going to turn this over in a couple shortly to Mary Pat, one of our leading actuaries involved in the group. But I first want to just say as a preview, in the work we've done, to try to to use our various analytical tools to try to narrow what areas we should focus on. There's 5 specific areas that become clear. First off, over the past 5 years, cardiac and circulatory problems have become a clear issue. This is broader than just heart disease, and it's not necessarily being seen in some typical things like ischemic heart disease, like coronary artery disease. In fact, what you're seeing more, and we'll have data on this in a couple of minutes, what you're seeing more is things like blood clots, hypertension, heart attacks, myocarditis, other less common types of heart disease, as opposed to the typical sort of hardening of the arteries, which is sort of the common thing that most Americans are aware of. Second, neurological and nervous system issues are a big increase in some key areas, and this is both terrible and tragic. Metabolic and digestive problems, so think like obesity, metabolic syndrome, but also people who have malnutrition. So a wide range of like possibly thyroid-related underlying conditions that have to do with metabolism. And then, one of the issues that gets a lot of attention, which I think unfortunately the data seems to show clearly true, is that it appears that cancer has risen markedly as well. And not all types of cancer. Lung cancer's down. Mary Pat will talk more about that. But most other types of cancers have risen, some of them by double-digit rates. External causes are more mixed, but of course that's all we all know about ODs long-term and drug issues and other types of violence and things like that. And these are also areas where our industry can make a difference. And I think with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mary Pat to speak a bit more about these topics.
Thanks, Josh. So I'm going to slow it down for a moment and back off from the pandemic period, push it way back to 1999, and we're going to focus on the top 2 causes of death for decades, which has been heart disease and cancer. Even during the pandemic, COVID only got up to number 3. In my preliminary check for 2024, COVID actually fell all the way down to number 15, just an FYI. That said, let's get back to heart disease and cancer. And I want to just talk about the long-term trend of what's been happening with heart disease and cancer, because these are some of the areas that we're really focusing on. That first decade, 1999 to 2009, heart disease had a lot of improvement, of over 30% decrease in mortality for heart disease. Cancer was slower at about, 14% improvement. But that next decade, what happened with heart disease is it slowed. It only improved, so that over 30% the first decade, then from 2009 to 2019, still before the pandemic, it slowed to only 12% improvement. And cancer still just steadily improved, 16%. over that decade. Then during the pandemic, well, you can see they both kind of went up, during the pandemic, 2020, 2021. Where are we in 2024? Well, heart disease, yeah, that's 1% worse compared to 2019. Okay. Cancer, 2% better. This is on an age adjusted death rate basis. On a crude rate basis, it's actually a little bit worse. So kind of back where it was in 2019. But there's been a disruption. If it had continued, this is at basically half the rate of improvement that cancer had been seeing before. So it's not improving as it used to. This is some of what we're talking about of mortality not improving anymore. And we're going to get into more detail. So we start at the high level and then we dig down into the details. But there's other causes of death, not just the top two that are concerning us, just as Josh mentioned. So some of the other ones that are kind of at the top level, stroke in particular, has caused concern. And if you look at this trajectory, I'm not going to talk numbers now. Let's just look at the shape of these trajectories. There were problems with these causes of death before the pandemic. Stroke was improving, again, from 1999 to about the 20 teens, and then it just kind of went sideways through the 20 teens until you hit the pandemic. Then it got worse, definitely worse during the pandemic, and it's still worse in 2024. Other ones, and these are kind of our metabolic ones that got worse during the pandemic, we have diabetes, kidney disease, and liver disease. And they also were kind of sideways before the pandemic. All of these are of concern. So it's not just the pandemic, it just made us more aware in some of these cases that these were problems before and got worse. So this is where we're talking about getting into the detail. Cancer seemed to have been improving over all of these decades and then slowed down during the pandemic. But there's all different kinds of cancer. So I took the top 6 kinds of cancer people are dying from, and one of the problems is lung cancer has swamped out all of the other ones. Lung cancer being driven primarily by smoking, of course, and because smoking incidence had decreased, lung cancer incidence decreased and lung cancer mortality decreased. So you can see that in that first table there. And the way I highlighted this, white just means it improved. Negative is good, positive is bad when it comes to mortality changes. And then I highlighted in red the things that got worse. And this is over the pandemic period. So breast cancer at young ages, we see colorectal cancer, and this is something that actually has a long-term trend that's bad. So 25 to 44 years, that younger age group that Josh was talking about, we're seeing a bad trend there, and that's long-term as well. Prostate cancer and pancreatic cancer, we're seeing some bad trends at older ages there. That might be missed treatment during the pandemic, or there may be some other things going on. I'm just looking at the statistics, not looking at causes here. So this is where we're saying we're starting at the high level and then getting down into the details. In my analysis, I'm mainly looking at what's called UCD, the underlying cause of death, where there's one and only one per death certificate. Well, Josh got into even more detailed analysis through the pandemic because you can have multiple causes of death or contributing causes of death. You can have up to 20 of those on death certificates and get into a lot more detail there. So I'm going to hand it back to Josh so he can show you some of the things that he found when he was looking at the changes in mortality through the pandemic.
Thank you, Mary Pat. And throughout my time in insurance and then on Wall Street, I was sort of a generalist, but ultimately what you do as a generalist when you've got lots of data is you look for patterns. And so when you do the like one level down analysis of these major 5 topics, by the subcategories of things that are coded on the death records, what you can see is clear patterns that arise in the groupings, not at the highest level groupings, but in the subgroupings. And what's very interesting, and when you do that for cardiac and circulatory, or if we can go back just Mitch, is maybe we can't. If don't worry about it. Well, okay, great. Is how many of these categories are red? And one of the various like early on insights, because we've done analysis like this in a number of different areas over the past couple of years of our, we have a research and medical team that meets, pretty regularly to talk about this kind of stuff. You're seeing the results of that. And a lot of the insights that came was when we eventually realized we weren't looking for a single silver bullet. We were looking for patterns of codes that are all rising together. And, one of the metaphors that we sort of came to is this recognition that in a lot of ways, what we're seeing is a sea of red. And so on the right-hand side of the page, and we're not going to get into like every line or anything, but like this is like the causes of death across all types at a higher level of granularity than Mary Pat was showing between 2018 and 2023. And obviously for actuaries that are interested, we'll send you the raw materials. You can pour through it and tell us, how you might do it differently or learn from it how to improve your own analysis. And it's doing it by age group. And so you can see comparing to age groups here in 2023 versus age groups in 2018, ultimately which ones are elevated. And the red is is bad, right? And so on the left-hand side of the page, we pulled out some of the insights, which is basically, look, hypertension, so high blood pressure as a cause of death has risen at about a 30% rate for nearly every, well, between a 20 and 30% rate for nearly every age group over the past 5 years. That's a big signal. I mean, these are generally pretty stable numbers. A lot of these things, if they're not rising, law of large numbers and, health moves slowly, those are big increases. And this is age adjusted. This isn't just so like aging or something. And so that's a big thing. Vein and lymph nodes, anemia, kidney, liver, we include those things on this list because they're so related to the cardiac and circulatory system. But then if we were to go on the bottom, you see the ischemic is down. That's negative and that's green. If you were to go to the next page, Mitch, and I apologize. What you can see if we zoom in just on this table, and then I'm doing this so that if others are interested, they can either redo the work or they can get the sense and they can do it themselves and improve upon it. What you see is that it's the other forms of heart disease, and this is sorted by like large cause of death. So, in 2023, there was 1.3 million people who died, and they had a notation of other forms of heart disease on their death record. And so that rate is up 8% over 2018. And it varies by age group. It's up 12% for 35 to 44-year-old people. If you look in the middle column. Hypertensive, high blood pressure, this is the one that's up 20 to 30%. Cerebrovascular, I think, is the next one. That's strokes, up 17 to 30, 17, 10%, 8%, 13%. Renal failure, you see noted there, that's, that's kidney, obviously. And in contrast, or I'm sorry, and I think if the next one I would speak to is if you look on the middle column, and this is what gives us such trouble in this whole general concept of like, what should we be doing differently now? Something's different, is that it is the 35 to 44-year-olds who are dying the most with these new forms or like this rising frequency of heart disease. So, that's, motivated a lot of our work in this topic. And in contrast, and the reason for us to, be thinking about these things, just doing the same thing as we always do is not the answer. And you can see that because the ischemic heart diseases, which has largely been the focus of like a lot of medical intervention, think like statins and the general advice you get from your doctor around coronary artery disease, diet, exercise, and everything else. This is actually down. These causes are not what's driving the problem. What's driving the problem is this new stuff, or at least, rising frequency of these other types. And so if we go to the next one, we're not going to go in this level of detail, nervous and neurological. But if you just, for understanding that's where the numbers come from on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, episodic disorders, so like seizures and stuff, up dramatically, over 5 years. Movement disorders, up dramatically. Degenerative, so Alzheimer's and similar, happening, thankfully somewhat less dramatic, but still significant on an age-adjusted basis and happening to younger people. So again, not good.
If
good.
I could interject, I
Yeah.
know one of this is Parkinson's. Parkinson's
Yes.
Deaths are up. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's a tragedy. If we were to go to the next page, Mitch, metabolic and digestive, this is the thing. I mean, it's sort of a cliche to say Americans are unhealthy and probably should lose weight. But actually the largest rise of death, according to the CDC in this category, is actually malnutrition, which is probably really suggestive of these people dying from other causes and then being malnutrition in their end of their death. But I think the reason I flagged that is because it's a complicated story and it has to do, possibly it even, there's some literature suggesting that this might be due to like systemic problems that people are having with their thyroid now. And then maybe COVID somehow impacted that, which is like a theory. and then that's leading to greater, as well as just generally, possibly, long-term changes in diet and exercise, which have been unhelpful, and then finally, if we were to go to the next one, and I think Mary Pat's already spoken about this a little bit, but I would just illustrate this chart. As I mentioned, sort of the metaphor of the sea of red. Just look at the colors on the right-hand side of the page. Almost every type of cancer on an age-adjusted basis is up, except for lung cancer and maybe colon cancer for some ages and maybe breast cancer, depending on how you measure it. And what I think it boils down to is the cancers that we have super duper focused on as a medical industry and as a society to try to reduce by stopping smoking and screening for breast cancer and doing things like that. Yes, we are having an impact on those. But if we're trying to measure the underlying incidence of cancer, you would want to scrub those out and then look at all these other ones which are rising at sometimes pretty substantial double-digit rates. And so this gives us a lot of concern, and it's motivated a lot of the work of our group. And I think we're going to go to the next slide, and that's and then I'd like to pass this over to Steve Saborin, who you previously introduced, our health actuary from Houston.
Thanks, Josh. I think when we get to the disabilities, we've seen some moderation of the life rates coming down to more pre-COVID levels, but even still, there's all the pull forward of mortality, and we still haven't gotten back to where we should be. But we're seeing in the disability data that the rates of disability continue to rise. And we could see that from this data, the number of people with disabilities for adults over 16 is up 5,000 people on disability, which is huge. It presents a great opportunity to identify these people early and reduce that risk through prevention. Let's go to the next slide. Now, looking more specifically at the workforce over age 16, we can see that this is up 35%. That's pretty huge, and it has a lot of implications for insurers and policyholders and the employers as well. So I have one client that's in the retail restaurant business that they've seen, for the same conditions that Josh was highlighting, their rates of disability are up 110% since COVID for those same conditions. They're offset by some of the other conditions being down, but that's a huge impact that it has on them, which highlights the opportunity for early intervention and prevention to keep workers healthy and productive, as well as policyholders to keep them off a claim. And this is going beyond just reducing claims, and it's about creating thriving workplaces and strengthening insurance portfolios for the long term. Let's go to the next slide. Globally, we're looking at German hospital data, and it's showing almost a 4-fold increase in hospitalizations related to tricuspid heart valve diagnoses since 2019, with rheumatic cases accounting for about 15 to 20% of the total. And this trend began before COVID, but it certainly appears to have accelerated since. And this, I think, points to the growing cardiac health crisis. For one of my clients with over 100,000 employees, I've had the opportunity to review their claim data, and their claims in the top 4 categories increased 9 to 44% from 23 to 24. So this is still an ongoing issue. And particularly in the nervous and neurological area, it's up 44%, which is huge. In the heart and circulatory, I think has a particularly significant issues related to safety. A CEO of a trucking company reached out to us because they lost 5 drivers in 6 months. And they're one of the smaller trucking companies, but they're working on a technology to provide advanced warning of health issues. And talking to some of the larger trucking companies, they're losing 15 to 20 drivers per year. And imagine if you're driving a truck, and actually, if you have a health issue, let's say a cardiac or a stroke, and you're at home, you have a chance to call 911 and potentially get saved. But if you're carrying a big rig, if you're driving a big rig and you run into, let's say, a bus with carrying a couple dozen kids, that becomes a rather significant loss of life and a client cargo in a truck. That's a huge issue and a burden for that company to bear with reputation loss, et cetera. So we're looking for partners to conduct a study for the industry, for the transportation, trucking, logistics, on the relationship between health and safety incidents. It would be great to find partners in that to be able to run some studies. Next slide. So this slide highlights mortality from rheumatic tricuspid valve disease, showing a rise from 1999 to 2024 that started a decade ago, but mirroring the German hospital surge as well. The non-rheumatic cases are excluded from here because they're minimal impact on mortality. I have two clients with over 100,000 employees that both have seen 35% increases in their life insurance claims and premiums, reflecting the broader mortality trend. They are coming down, similar to what we're seeing at the broader trends, but they're still facing elevated mortality. So that's why we're looking to partner with organizations like GoMo Health, who is rolling out behaviorally designed, personalized solutions to help tackle these trends. Now I'll pass it on to Greg.
Steve, before I get started, I want to talk a little bit about addressing one specific behavior, which is smoking, and then also about behavior in general. But I thought I'd start by sharing why I joined the ICSL. When I started as a life actuary in the mid-'80s, there was almost a universal consensus that mortality was going to continue to improve by 1% to 2% a year, probably at least for the next 10 years. And then one of the big debates was, would it start to slow and plateau, or would it even get substantially better in terms of longevity because of breakthroughs in, everyone's excited about DNA testing and new surgeries and drugs and things like that. I never thought I'd see a time in my life in the United States where mortality didn't continue to improve. And I just find that shocking with the resources and everything that we have to put to bear in this country. And so I'm just excited to start trying to be constructive. If we can come up, we should be doing a lot better is basically what it comes down to. And I'm looking for solutions along with the group. So here we put up a poll, very simple question. Do you think deaths from cancer are increasing or decreasing? Now, we can't do it here. This isn't a live event, but what's really interesting, and Mitch saw this too, when you do this live and you see the hands go up for increasing and then you see the hands go up for decreasing, and it generally tends to be pretty split. What was interesting to me is to look at the faces on the people, and they're kind of looking around at their own group, and these are largely actuaries, and they can't even agree on something as simple as, is things getting better or worse? And that's why I want to drill down specifically on smoking, because I think that helps shed some light on what we're seeing and why people are seeing different things. But this isn't surprising to me to see this poll. It's, some people think it's rising significantly, some slightly, some decreasing slightly, some significant. I mean, look at that split. It just shows you how I think, a reasonably intelligent group can look at this thing, and we'll drill down on that. Next slide, please.
It's important to note that on the right-hand side, the right-hand side, the risen significantly is second. So that's really the top. On the right-hand side.
Thanks, Steve. Sorry, I got to close the poll to go on. So one reason I think this is split, and Mary Pat and Josh both kind of hinted at this, is the largest cause of cancer deaths is lung cancer. And we've known for a long time that smoking contributes strongly to lung cancer. So for those of you in the audience a little younger, I think you'll be a little surprised to do a little trip down memory lane with me. As recently as 70 years ago, there could be cigarette advertising in the American Medical Association journal. So you actually had medical journals that were allowing cigarette smoking advertising in their journal. The ads were tugging at your strings. You can see the baby on the left, just one question, Mom, aren't you going to smoke a Marlboro? They're as pure as you can imagine. And the amount you would see of smoking, if you ever go back and watch an old movie, everybody's just smoking constantly, and even in the cartoons. And some of you might remember one of the things smoking, the cigarette manufacturers were very good about penetrating the male market. It was kind of macho, and they realized they were having problems getting women to smoke. So you also notice the ad campaign like "You've Come a Long Way, Baby" and Virginia Slims, and it was almost challenging them into being independent and smoking more and things like that. So think about that. That was not that long ago that we were proactively encouraging smoking kind of as a society. I forgot one other thing. There was even an argument that because you took a deep inhale, that was actually exercising your lungs. So you had to help yourself by smoking cigarettes. Next slide, please. So as recently, it was 50 years ago, I think they finally stopped allowing cigarette advertising on TV. But we still much more recently had smoking on an airplane. You can't make it out very well, but that chart on the left is the seat assignments on an airplane. And if this was live, I'd say, how many of you actually smoked on an airplane? Or at least been with somebody who was smoking, so you had to go sit in the smoking section. So those blue seats in the back, and they would put like a thing on which row was the last row you could not smoke in. It was kind of like in those church pews, you'd have the reserve things. But it was just a can of confined secondhand smoke back there. It was amazing. In my high school in 1980, there was an uproar because they moved the smoking lounge from being indoors to outdoors. It was undercover, but there was the smokers were upset because they were being relegated to having to go outside, and that was as recently as 1980. That picture on the right is hard to make out. I apologize. That's actually a smoking lounge in Japan probably 20 years ago, and those were very, very common. They finally didn't want you smoking out in the open. So if you look in there, those are two glass doors that slide open, and you can't really tell, but there's two gentlemen sitting in there, and the white shirts, you can barely see the outline because the smoke is so thick in there that you couldn't even see the people above the waist in there. So, it wasn't that long ago that kind of behavior was taking place. So I guess my point is a couple things. One, if we as a society want to make changes, sometimes it takes a long time, but we can have a huge impact. And we've had a huge impact on the rate of smoking. And I think Mary Pat will show more later, but this is the appalling thing to me, that cancer deaths aren't improving drastically, because lung cancer continues to decline. It is something that's controllable. It's something that doesn't even require medical technology or anything like that. It is a behavioral change. We all know we should do it. So that alone should be dragging mortality, cancer mortality down, which should be making all mortality go down. And this is one reason, and Josh kind of hinted at it too. You've got to look through, and you can't say, hey, I'm satisfied because deaths are kind of flat, so that's not a bad thing. It's a horrible thing when you take into account the fact that lung cancer is decreasing as fast as it is. Okay, next slide. Now, one of the things I find interesting too, now we were pretty heavy-handed in reducing smoking because it was pretty universally known how bad that was. But there's other things that, and I'm going to steal some of Gary's thunder because he coined this in a way I had been thinking, but I didn't, really, that knowledge is not the key, behavior is the key, right? So I think I also help people with retirement income. And people know that they should save more early on, and there's compounding, they should save more for retirement. The issue has almost moved more to how do you change behaviors? How do you get people to save more, and how do you get them to do things? One of the first times I went to a large automobile insurer, we were chit-chatting before the meeting, and the chief investment officer, somebody asked them about why they weren't doing more to improve traffic safety and improve driving habits. And this is a little too flippant, but basically said, look, we're a cost plus organization, right? We get to reprice and reset premiums every year. In fact, if claims go up, 10% of a larger number is a larger number than 10% of a smaller number. So they really weren't even contemplating whether they should be influencing consumer behavior. And I was in the camp, as recently as 10 years ago. If you'd told me that my insurance company wanted to monitor my driving, I would have said, pound sand. I don't want that privacy and things like that. But as we've gotten more used to Big Brother and having a phone on you at all time, I actually did start utilizing one of the Drive Safe app for State Farm. And I find I really like it. I do monitor my driving. I'll tell you one specific thing I found. My worst driving by far was whenever I went to the airport. And I thought about it, and what I realized is every time I was getting ready, I'd say, I'm going to leave for the airport at 3. I would remember I forgot to pack something. I forgot to make a phone call. I forgot to say goodbye to somebody, and something happened. And next thing you know, I am white knuckling it to the airport because I didn't leave at the intended time. So now I consciously, I was literally so embarrassed that I was failing every test, acceleration, cornering, braking, whatever. And so I now plan to leave for the airport 20 to 30 minutes earlier than I ever would have before. And I think it's really helped my behavior. And in some ways, I think we're both benefiting from that improved behavior. So the one on the right is just it's a summary of a drive. That one I happen to do okay on. I won't show you some of my worst things, but it monitors those things, and I do like to look at it. And I think it helps me consciously think about in the car, am I driving in a responsible manner? The one on the left is slightly different. Insurance companies, they also, my homeowner's insurance at State Farm also provides me a voltage report. It monitors my house for free, looking for spikes and things like that. It helps me out because I know when it's just me that went out of power, or they'll say, no, 8 and 10 members in your neighborhood all reported the same thing. So I know I don't have to go look at the fuse box. I know it's an industry outage. What's interesting to me is, starting as a life actuary, I always thought that life insurance was this long-term thing. So it was more important for us to help our insurance clients with behavior and improve their outcomes and things like that. But I think life companies have been more reticent to ask personal questions and dig into people's lifestyles and things like that. So I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, I think the property casualty insurance companies are showing us a good way to be much more interactive with their clients and prospective clients, and allow their agents to engage with their policyholders in deeper, more meaningful ways. And I think they're doing a good job, and it's a positive. So I just wanted to share those examples. And I think the insurance industry needs to play a key role, or can play a key role, in improving all these behaviors. And that's life insurance, that's property casualty insurance, that's health insurance. So anyway, that's just my appeal to ask insurers to try to be more proactive where they can and help us solve this problem.
Well, thank you, Greg. And that leads us into the next section of our presentation. And while these trends that we've covered this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, are concerning, and quite frankly, looking at these trends as much as we do can be demoralizing at times, there is a real opportunity for us to act and make a difference. And Josh touched on our original concept early on, very much a property and casualty risk management mindset for life insurers to take the shift in mortality and morbidity trends that are affecting younger age groups, and provide either voluntary screenings, whether it makes business sense for them to incorporate it in their in a product, or just offer it to their insurers. It allows post pandemic. It allows policyholders to have a better assessment of their health. And it's a win for the policyholder, and it's a win for the insured to reduce some of the claim payouts that we have seen since post 2020. And as we have gone on this 2.5 to 3 year journey, what we are realizing more and more is that this is not just applicable to the life insurance industry. We talked about how health payers are experiencing higher morbidity rates. It could definitely help them as a risk management tool. Property and casualty lines, looking at higher casualty lines such as aviation and commercial trucking, which Steve touched on. Our sense of it is, we can create healthier policyholders, create healthier members in our communities. It's going to lower the risk profile across all lines of insurance. And something else that is really exciting to our group is the ability for life and health insurers to have an engagement with their policyholders that's not traditionally seen in those lines of insurance. Proactive health initiatives can really help boost customer engagement. I'll steal a line from one of our board members, Richard Watts. It can really create a generational trust and customer building by offering these proactive health initiatives to ultimately sell more policies and really create a trust that's really has not been that's not quite as present for these lines of insurance. And something else that our group, I want to thank Marcy Sheeran and Rebecca Ritchie, who have been leading our Agent Advisory Council. We see the same thing for trusted advisors and employee benefit brokers and agents to connect with their policyholders in a way that's not traditionally seen in that industry. We can really excited about the agents being more. It allows them to, have something else as their in their toolbox, and ultimately help them sell more policies as well through this experience. And what we have discovered in our many meetings with insurers and reinsurers is how important the engagement aspect is to any type of wellness initiative or any type of testing and screening efforts. And so we're really excited about our partnership that we announced with Gomo Health about 3 months ago, our Forward Living program, to really solve that engagement piece in a highly personalized, scalable way. And I'm excited to have Gary Holderby from Gomo Health here today to talk a little bit about Gomo's capabilities and why they felt compelled to partner with the insurance collaboration. So, Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys here today and join the discussion on this very important topic. We're very excited to have came across you guys and for being able to partner with you to bring the vast experiences and insights of both teams together to talk about and work on changing the trajectories that we've been talking about this afternoon. Outside of the tragic loss of life that all of these trends represent that we've been discussing today, if we zoom out from that, we see a tremendous economic impact. In the US alone, in 2024, healthcare expenditures for care and services were getting close to $5 trillion, representing almost 18% of our GDP. And oddly enough, that rate of that percent of GDP is actually growing faster than the overall GDP the rate is. So yet through all of that expenditure of funds, we still see that tremendous sea of red that Josh was talking about. Obesity rates over 40% among adults, high blood pressure, 47% of adults. As a major takeaway from that, that to me really reinforces the comments that Greg had made. And Greg, I appreciate you giving me a tee up for that. The major takeaway is that money and education is not enough to adequately move the needle on health outcomes and the mortality rates. Well, if that's the case, then what is it? What's the important thing that we have to do? Well, the question becomes, how do we get people to do the things we know as an industry that they need to do to get healthy and to keep them healthy in a sustainable way? And historically, as an industry, we focused on the body and the mind very separately, and we've never really effectively tied them together. But the key to this is understanding the connection between the physical health and the mental, emotional, and behavioral health of key populations that are driving these costs and outcomes in our system. What do we mean by that? Well, people make decisions every day with their brain on what to do, whether to drive fast, Greg, whether to hard brake on your way to the airport, whether to oversleep. But when you apply that to healthcare, we also make decisions every day with our brains and emotions about, do we take our medicines? Do we go to the ER or do we go to an urgent care clinic? Do we ignore symptoms because we're afraid? There's fear, depression, anxiety. All these different things come into the fact that we're making these decisions about our physical health. What makes it challenging as an industry, because the technology industry has tried to respond to that over the last few years, and the outcome of that has been even more confusion. You know, the vast thousands and thousands of individual apps for individual things. And most of these things have significant comorbidities, and it puts a cognitive overload onto those that are struggling to try to even make this care realistic for them. So when we look at that physical, emotional, behavioral ecosystems in which we're all making these decisions are as varied as the individuals themselves. For some, it's fear, depression, anxiety. For some, it's a negative outlook on life. What's the use? I can't ever do this. It's a lack of confidence in themselves and their ability to understand it and to live it and apply it to their lives. And for others, it's financial or other social determinant type things, family environments, transportation. It could be a number of these things. So at Gomo Health, as Greg had mentioned, we're leveraging a human-centered science with the advanced technologies to understand and meet people where they are in their lived environment. And that was a great example, Greg. We didn't coordinate your example of the airport ride, but that's a great example. It wasn't that you didn't know how to drive, nor what the speed limit was, nor what the time of the flight was. And if you have Waze or Google Maps, you also understood the timing of your drive to get there. What it doesn't take into effect is, did you oversleep? What caused you to oversleep? Were you slow to get ready? Had you not gone to the cleaners? All these environmental things going on in your life that were actually the drivers behind all that. And as an industry, we've typically studied that last mile correlation and attributed full causation to that when there are underlying things that we're making choices of every day in our lives. So GOMO, we have a proprietary behavioral and cognitive science called Behavioral RX that's specifically designed to increase human motivation, activation, and resiliency as it relates to all areas of our physical, emotional, behavioral care. Now, our solutions across the board are uniquely designed to convert very complex protocols into simple step-by-step actionable bites of easily digested information to ensure a higher patient compliance with their care. So we've learned through all this that the science and the method of patient engagement is as important to the outcomes as the clinical protocols themselves. And I'm not diminishing the clinical protocols. What I'm saying is, what good are they if no one is doing with them nor complying with them? The best drugs developed by major pharma have no impact if it's sitting in a bottle. All the questions of asking, did you take it? Yes, I took it, but why do you still have half a bottle and you should have been out by now? So all these things go into people's lives about how do they comply and how do we get to them and meet their needs and address their needs and build their confidence in their care plan and to build their compliance and their resiliency in these programs. So using Behavioral RX, GOMO personalizes the engagement by leveraging proven cognitive and psychological techniques to stimulate those moments of action. The result is that in partnering with many of our healthcare related companies across the gamut of types of verticals within healthcare, from insurance companies to providers, population health companies, government agencies, not-for-profits, employers, we've been able to see success rates in engagement, in most cases, of over 90% in adoption, activation, and retention in their care programs across multiple conditions. And we've seen significant increases in patients being involved and having the confidence to be involved in their own care. And that's a critical point, that the patients feel they have a voice in their own care. It's not something being shoved down their throat. They understand it. They have a confidence that they can do it, and they participate in that process. It's been incredibly exciting for us to see impact across a variety of key metrics and quality initiatives in this too. Things like a 50% reduction in ER visits and readmissions, 50% reduction in hospital stays. And by increasing, and this was referred to earlier, I think Josh referred to this, by increasing the early detection. And how do we find these people at a very early stage? And how do we intervene in their lives at a very early stage to stem the flow and the progress of these disease conditions and their cost? And it's very difficult to do, specifically in populations that are non-compliant by nature, where a lot of these problems come from and happen. So due to the design of our platform and our algorithms, we're able to deliver a very highly personalized and individual approach, but still do this at extremely high volumes of scale. And we're very excited to leverage the incredible experience and knowledge of the ICSL team and coming together to further deliver this type of technology solution and tool to all the areas across the healthcare industry across the USA. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for that. And those that want to learn more about our partnership, there are articles. Josh mentioned AM Best, Insurance Newsnet has written about us, and as well as Life Annuity Specialist. So we're very excited about the first 3 months of our partnership and what's to follow with some of the opportunities that we have in front of us. So Gary, thank you so much for joining. I think in closing, just wanted to mention that we, like I started at the beginning, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. If you or anybody in your organization would be moved to help our efforts, we don't pretend to have all the solutions or research by any means. So if you're an actuary and want to help our actuarial team, product development, medical advisory, our agent advisory council, like I mentioned, we would love your help. And if that doesn't quite isn't something that you're interested in, we're corporate partnerships, opportunities for individuals to contribute. We're really excited about the impact that we think we've already had in identifying the problem and working with the industry through this. And we're really excited about where things are going in our mission. And I'd like to thank Humaculture for being our first recipient of the Certificate of Impact from the Insurance Collaboration. And also those that want to volunteer with us. We would love to celebrate you on our social media and other posts that we do for all of our volunteers that have put so much into this. And I think in closing, I would just like to say thank you to our entire team. We have a few people that are doing this full time, but this has been the effort largely of a volunteer-led group. And I can't say enough good things about what the leadership that our board has shown. Everybody, the thousands of hours that have gone into our research analysis and conferences and many, many meetings that have gone into this. And I really could not be more proud to be a part of this group. And I'm very excited about where we are heading.